we've built
Yeah.
a really good friendship. Even ended up on a delayed plane coming back, I think it was from Miami.
Yeah, that's when you and I like dove into your fear of flying and you put me in touch with Hypnosis. So I think we're going to get into that in a second.
The cultural phrase, Lori knows it, right? Could they do it on a cold and rainy night in Stoke? Educate me, because I was lost and everyone was laughing during the pre-match.
The beauty of it is that you see how many teams try to address the problem, which is Messi. You're wasting your time. Do not, honestly, you are wasting your time.
Thank you for speaking sense, correct. Welcome to the Soccerish podcast. I know we're in season 2. I've lost track of the number of episodes. Let me see here. It's Cheat Sheet Soccerish episode 12. And today we have an incredible guest, friend of ours. We work with him on the TV side of it and bringing the game to you. And I think the beauty of learning about this guest, at least for me personally, is understanding his soccer background, including that he used to play for the USL Rochester Rhinos. Not that that's his biggest claim to fame, but to everyone, we bring you Danny Higginbotham. So played with Stoke City, as we know, USL Rochester Rhinos, not putting that in the top, but just I think that's kind of a fun fact because that was back in 2013. So the boy is still a young boy. But also importantly, MLS commentator and also does some Premier League commentating with Peacock, with Rebecca Lowe and co. and all the others on that show. So Danny, welcome to the show. I know typically sometimes we're always talking about NWSL, but we're really looking to get excited into talking about the X's and O's with MLS, U.S. men's national team, and also your experiences here in the United States. So welcome, Danny.
Thank you, Christina. The only thing I would say is that I didn't play for Rochester Rhinos.
Well, I was thinking that you didn't.
It was getting me concerned, and I was like, thinking, am I losing my memory? I was like,
am I losing right? No, I have that here in my connection notes, which is the
that you hadn't either. Just from the stance that, like, whenever we've met up or talked, like, we've talked about how you came to Philly and you met your wife, and she obviously is from Philadelphia, so that's what brought you over here. But you met over in England, right?
I was on holiday over here, but you.
Oh, that's right. You did tell me that.
You scared the life out of me. Then I was like,
oh my God, that's hilarious. No, Kev, do you want me to do that take again? Because I got that in the notes and I was like, this is amazing. This is a random
It is amazing.
fact.
No, you can keep it in there if you want. And then we'll talk as though I did.
Let's do pretend that you did play for them.
Rochester Rhinos. I know, right? They're no longer that league, that team no longer exists. But no, Danny, well, anyways, we could talk about Stoke City anytime. But
there we go.
love to have you into the show. Welcome. For sure.
No, it's good. It's good to get a text from you last week just out of the blue, and I was like, definitely. It's great because like from yourself, Christina, like, and obviously I've been in touch so many times, like with you, and when I've like been unsure about something that's been called and things like that, and just for clarification, because things are always changing all the time, so that's been really helpful. And then with yourself, Lori, as well, we've built a really good friendship. Even ended up on a delayed plane coming back, I think it was from Miami.
Yeah, you and I, that's when you and I like dove into your fear of flying and you put me in touch with Hypnosis. So I think we're going to get into that in a second. But speaking of you reaching out to Christina, okay, we'll have 2 questions. Are you in your office? Like, where are the jerseys?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so this is like in England, right? Basements aren't a big thing. They're not a huge thing.
Yeah,
so like when we moved over here, I was like, you know what? I want to get a house with a basement and then sort of like make a bit of a games room. So we've done that. And I've come downstairs in now to do the podcast because the boys have just got back from school. And as much as you tell them to be quiet, it's impossible. They have zero interest in being quiet. And then there's the dogs as well. And then so my wife for my birthday, she got a lot of my shirts framed. So they're like all around this room. I've got like a pool table in here, but it's flooded twice. That's one of the bad things about having a basement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we've had to get that sorted out, but we don't really use it that much. So we need to start using it a little bit more now. Come down here, watch films and that. But it was just a thing just to put a few shirts up from over the years, really.
Yeah, no, that's nice. I wasn't sure if it was an office or like a basement game room, which is cool. But I want to go back a quick second because you were saying you and Christina will chat and try to get calls right. You were actually on the Cincinnati Columbus game this past weekend, and there was like a bit of a controversial because side note, Danny and I are on a group message. I don't participate that much because I'm like, there's so much going on. I can't like chime in all the time, but I do read them.
I get it.
And one of the things that Danny was talking about was like a bit of a controversial call and not having a great angle on that offside, right? Is that?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if you've seen it, Christina, but like from my perspective, so it's Cincinnati against Columbus. It's a deciding game. You know, it's game 3 of MLS in the playoff series, and I'm trying to think now. It starts from Patrick Schulte. He gets the ball and he plays it forward, and it's a great ball. Plays it to Herrera, the right wing back. Ball's put into the box, and then Russell Rowe puts the ball into the back of the net. So obviously that is the time then for Steve Cangelosi, who I work with, to sort of like, you know, that's his goal time. That's the thing. I don't get involved with that. I start to come in the replays. But while that's happening, I've obviously got the quad box next to me, which is a VAR screen, and they're looking at the replays. So in the back of my mind, I'm looking at it, and the angle that I saw, which is a really good angle, shows that, in my opinion, I still stick to it right now, that Herrera is in an offside position when the ball is played to him. So then the replay comes in, I'm talking about the goal, and then obviously you mentioned the fact that it could be called back for offside. We then get a replay in our screen so everyone can see it at home. And for me, it looks very obvious that I personally think he's in an offside position. You know, when you're looking at a lot of the times what can help as well is the grass, the different shades of grass.
For sure.
And that was a big thing that sort of helped me. And then VAR obviously taking a look at it, and we know that the way things are in MLS, how offside works, it's clear and obvious error. So the only thing I've said is that, you know, I would be very surprised if this wasn't called back, because it's an offside. And then within 30 seconds, 45 seconds, they'd given the goal. So the only thing I could think from that scenario was, you know, it's not seen as a clear and obvious error. But from my side of things, it's like, I've got to say it sort of how I see it. And then every replay that we did, and even when we went to the highlights afterwards, I was saying, you know, I thought it was offside. But it's just one of those calls where it's like the clear and obvious error. At first, when I was doing MLS and it was clear and obvious error on offside, I looked at it and I thought, this is really good, that, you know, it's a clear and obvious error. But then I did a game, Cincinnati versus Philadelphia Union, a conference semi-final, and Cincinnati scored a last-minute goal. And obviously it's a huge game. Philadelphia Union end up being knocked out because of that. And I said at the time that it was offside, but it's one of those things. It's not clear and obvious. Now, from Cincinnati's perspective, I'm sure they will have been really frustrated, but on the positive side for them, and it didn't affect the game because they came back and they scored 2 goals and ended up winning the game. But it's just one of those situations where it's like, you have to give your opinion. And my opinion was, it wasn't being swayed by any sort of angle that I saw. So I still stood by the fact that I thought it was offside.
So it's interesting that you say that, Danny, because like when I do commentary for like the referee side of it, there's times, and I remember my first one was with Fox Sports, and it was the Women's World Cup in 2019. And for the most part, you know, I would say 8 out of 10 times, you know, my analysis was on point with what the referees ended up doing in the game. And I remember this one time, I can't remember distinctively the game, but I remember the feeling where I was like, oh, you know, here's what's going to happen. Here's the decision. This is going to come out easy. And then the referee either did recommend it, and then the referee didn't take it. And immediately the energy that I got back from even some of the producers was like, oh, you got that wrong, Christina. And I was like, oh, like, how did I get that wrong? Like, no, this is what the outcome was supposed to be, right? So then you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, how did I get this wrong? I've used the facts in front of me. I've used the video angles, which we should have the same. And then I found out through the back end, right, through the community, that the decision by the referees was an error, even with VAR was the error. Okay. And the analysis was correct. So we made obviously 2 critical errors that naturally no one from FIFA is going to come out and say we made an error, especially on the referee side of it, understandably so. But I think you do, back to your point, need to lean in on what you see and what you have in front of you. And, you know, you just ground the facts back into the law, especially if you don't have a referee analyst on that side of it, because referees could still be wrong, even with VAR, even with technology and what you see. And if you're supporting it with, you know, and I do appreciate this because Lori does it too, and Foudy does it too, and you do it too. So I feel like I'm in good company with the people who ask me, but you guys send me clips and timestamps and ask what my thoughts are. And I appreciate that because, you know, at the end of the day, I tell people I will never be on every single game, nor do I want to. No offense, but at the end of the day, you guys are educating the fan and the young soccer fan at that, on how it is. So no, go in, lean in, even if the decision comes out differently. And was it the 86th minute, the Cincinnati versus Columbus? Was it that goal?
No,
Okay.
it will have been. It was the first goal. So Columbus scored. It was the first goal, and
Okay.
if I had to guess, I'm going to say six. I don't know why, but 67 minutes is sticking in my head.
Okay. Yeah. Like, and I'll take a look at that so we can give the people what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's and then the thing is as well, Christine, and it's like I always try and go back. So for example, my son's playing yesterday. He's got an under-13s team and I coach it, and they played really well yesterday. And but they ended up losing the game. So then after the game, I think like the way I try and always go with my kids is like, instead of saying to them, okay, well, you could do this better, you could do that better, I open the conversation with, how did you think you played? And then he came out and straight away was like, oh, I'm a little bit down. I said, oh, you're a little bit down because you missed a chance, because he had a good chance. He was like, no, he was like, the referee. And I was like, I need to stop you straight away there. I said, first of all, we don't go down that road, because you as a young footballer, could you have scored a goal? And he said, yeah, but I missed it. Okay, so would you say that that was a mistake from you? And he's like, yeah, it was. Okay, so then everybody on that football field can and possibly will make a mistake. It's as simple as that. And I think that's where, because I did a refereeing course when I lived in England. It was for a show that I was doing on Sky Sports. And I was only there for about an hour and a half. And the different things that have to go through the referee's head at that specific moment, it's as though he or she has to actually come up with 3 different ways before they actually come to the conclusion. And I walked away from there having a newfound respect for referees, for assistant referees, whatever role it is, because it's not just as simple as making a decision. There's so much that goes into making that decision. It's like a footballer. As a player, when you're crossing the ball into the box, it's like, okay, I want to get it into a specific area. It needs to be on a specific foot. I need to have a specific angle. So for a referee, it's exactly the same. There seems to be so many judgment calls before the actual decision is made. And I got a greater respect and a greater understanding from that. And don't get me wrong, there are certain scenarios when you're covering a game where it's like, I think the referee's got that one wrong. But then you also have to take into account that everybody on the football field makes a mistake. And that can go for referees, it can go for assistant referees, and that is part and parcel of life. And you have to give a little bit more grace, I think, in those scenarios.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Danny, when you retired, did you know this is what you wanted to get into media broadcast, or kind of what was the avenue for you?
It was interesting because, like, I think when you look to a certain extent, not with everything, but the majority of things in life, I look at it and I think to myself, okay, everything happens for a reason, within reason, so to speak. Yeah. So I remember we played West Ham in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. Then my 14-year-old son Joshua was born, and then a couple of weeks later we played Chelsea, and I did my cruciate against Chelsea, and that was the end of my season. We then made the semi-final of the FA Cup. So what happened was, because I was obviously, playing week in, week out, the channels that were covering the FA Cup semi-final at the time, they wanted someone that they could speak to. And I remember, I think one of the first people I spoke to was actually Rebecca Lowe, who obviously I work with now at NBC. And she would come to me, I think, during the game or just before the game, and I would chat with her because I was within the stadium. And then I started to get this feeling that I was really enjoying it. And then as time went on, I got back, I did all my rehab, got back playing again. And then when I got to about 33, 34, I was then going to a few different clubs as my career was sort of, going downward slowly and coming towards an end. And I started to enjoy doing the media side of things more than I did playing football. And that for me was a blessing, because, Laurie, when you have your football career, it's very, very difficult to get anything that can come anywhere near that. Yeah. Whatever's going to be your next career in life. And people forget that when they say you retire at 35, nobody really wants to retire at 35, but you don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. Your body's at a point, like, your head will be telling you one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, I can do this. Then you can't. And I remember my very last game, I promised some of my friends. So my local team growing up was a team called Altrincham. It was in not far outside Manchester. And that was a team I supported. They play in the National League now. And I promised some of my friends that I'd finish my career there. So I did that. I went and I played 2 games. The second game we played away. It was nothing to do with the surroundings or anything like that. And there was a challenge, a 50-50 challenge, and I didn't go in for it because I was frightened now of getting hurt. And I came off the pitch, and I'd known the manager for all of 10 days. And I just said to him, said, I'm done. I said, I'm finished. Rang my wife. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I remember us having that conversation via our group text about just when your body, like your mind's saying one thing, and then literally you wake up one day and it's like, nope, you can't do that. That's why I don't really actually play anymore, because I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm moving around the field very swiftly and smoothly. And then I get out there and it's like, 10 man, like, no, this is like,
it is
not it.
and it isn't. And I think if you speak to most people, I think if you spoke to most people that have retired now, whose decision it was to retire, I'd be really interested to see what percentage in hindsight would have retired a year earlier. Because you keep trying to you keep trying to find what is lost, what is gone. And you think to yourself, oh, well, I just didn't sleep great last night. Oh, I didn't prepare properly. When in all reality, it's your body just getting to the point where it's like, no, enough is enough now. Your body can't handle it anymore. But for so long, you probably go as far to lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself about where you are. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to the critical point where it's like, okay, I have to accept this. There's a wonderful feeling, because then you're at peace with it, especially if you've retired and it's under your own circumstances. If you've had to retire because of injury early on and things like that, I have so much sympathy for people like that, because it's very difficult. That wasn't sort of their decision, but to sort of bow out on your own terms, knowing that, okay, enough is enough now. I think that's probably the ultimate way to be able to, walk away and say, right, I have no regrets. I have nothing that I look back and think, okay, I missed opportunities due to injury or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful, because I think I'm just going to write Ted, my husband, he refereed Major League Soccer, FIFA, and he retired. Funny enough, Lori and I were just talking on that before you got on, Danny, and he retired. She's like, what is he up to? I'm like, well, he does, his regular work and helps with her little one, and now can play golf every day if he chose to. So I think he leaned in definitely to the Florida retirement, but it was so unique to see his retirement experience versus mine. Like mine was, I kept getting injured. I kept, tearing hamstrings after the kiddo. Like I just kept getting injured to the point that, the fitness standards and times kept getting lower. But for, the 2019 Women's World Cup, and that was where I was supposed to go as a FIFA referee. And, I got passed over, and then the TV role helped. So I think that helped mentally, even though I could tell you I struggled stepping off the field. But for him, he made the choice, Danny, to your point, like he can still hit those sprint times. He still trains like he does if he was referring Major League Soccer. If you take him and drop him in a game, he could still keep up with it. But he's made a choice and he's at peace. I remember he was doing Man City. I forgot, it was Man City versus someone last summer in Ohio Stadium, the Buckeye Stadium. And we went and he was refereeing the game. And at the end, right, he had Erling Haaland. He had all the people that you would want. And I was like, hey, how was that? And he was like, oh, it was okay. And I was like, all right, you need to retire because you no longer get those adrenaline rush pieces to it. But it is a fascinating thing. So like you and like Lori, like if you were to recommend for players, right, when they're getting to the end of their career, like how do you set yourself up for that level of being able to make that transition and to be comfortable with that?
I think I don't know whether Laurie would say the same thing, but I think so towards the end of my career, what I enjoyed about getting towards the end of my career was sort of being that older voice in the dressing room, where younger players would come up to you. And I remember when I was younger, if something had gone wrong in a certain game, I remember Craig Burley, he was my captain at Derby, and I was going for a rough patch. And I just said to him one Monday, I think it was, I was like, we want a little bit of help. And he just said to me, put it down to experience. And I was like, put it down to what? He's like, yeah, put it down to experience. I was like, well, that's not helping me in the moment. But then, but then what happened was, as you get older, and then as you become sort of a more senior player, as you're getting older yourself, when something goes wrong, okay, I can use the experience that I've had previously, and that was such a big help. But as in terms of the transition for people, and this is something that I would speak to players about when I was playing myself, I was sort of transitioning. What I would say is, if you can sort of dip your toe in something that you want to do whilst you're still playing, that for me is something that I think is very, very valuable, because what you do find with a lot of players is they'll retire one day and then it's like, right, I'm going to think about what I'm going to do for the next 6 months, 7 months, whatever. And don't get me wrong, it's great to have that little bit of a break, but to have a situation where, so what I did, and I don't think I did it on purpose, but I don't think I could have planned it out any better. So what I did, I went from full-time football. I could have still stayed full-time, but the media side of things was starting to get going for me. So then I had the opportunity to go and play part-time. So I went to play part-time at Chester, and it was brilliant. We would train on a Tuesday and a Thursday and a game on a Saturday. That left me the other days then to sort of look into the media side of things and if I would enjoy it. And then I did that probably for maybe about 5 months. And then I think I only had a matter of weeks at Altrincham. And I was ready then for the transition. So when I then decided I was going to finish playing, it was tough at the time, because, you know, you have your family members, like I had my mum, my dad, and my older brother. But other than those three, football was the fourth thing that I'd known for the longest. So it was a little bit of an adjustment, but I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I was enjoying it. I knew that there was going to be, you know, opportunities. Then it was up to me. So that's what I would say. I would say it's all about the transition. And when you get to a certain age in football, it's like, okay, what are you going to do next? Do you want to go into coaching? If you want to do your coaching, do your badges. If there's other things you want to do, then speak to people. I don't know whether you were the same, Lori, like you're transitioning, because obviously what you're doing now, you're here, there, and everywhere. And you're doing like amazing with it. But what was it from your side of things?
Yeah, slightly different, just because the women's game is just now really starting to take off in the last few years. So I would say, and the point I was going to follow up with what you just mentioned, it makes a lot of sense, because I feel like players now are starting to get more set up for that next stage in their life after soccer. A lot of players are doing current things, whether it's on the media side while they're playing, and then that's just propelling them into that next stage, which makes that transition a lot smoother. Mostly I would say from like an emotional standpoint, right? But for me, I would say the thing that I found the struggle was, I initially thought I was going to go, a lot of my background was strength and conditioning. And you know, it played a big part in my career in terms of keeping me injury free. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to help. There's a ACL epidemic, right? Is that the right word?
Yeah, I think that's good.
I'd use that
very
word.
good.
We still have the conversation how to fix
And
those.
that was really starting to come to, it was really starting to come to the forefront. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to help young athletes stay injury free, because what we're finding, particularly, and I think you would know this too, Danny, and obviously you, Christina, but Danny more so, coming over and seeing how much of the youth game is a business, right? And the more, it's just like, how do you keep up with, like, you're being sold this bill of goods, like your kid plays on this team, then they're going to the national team, right? And so, but what we're finding is we have unprepared kids that are playing a high level game of soccer. And so then the injuries are rampant, especially on the women's side. So with all that said, I thought I was going to get into the strength and conditioning world. Well, the problem, that the toughest part for me was, I was still trying to operate, once I retired, like in the 1%, like I had been with the U.S. women's national team. And I come out and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the strength and conditioning coach. And I'm like operating in the 1%. And I'm like, no one else is. And I don't even actually know what this means in this atmosphere of what that actually meant. I was just like, okay, I want to be the best at what I'm doing. And you just realize, like, wait a second, you need to take a deep breath, or at least that's what I needed to. And it wasn't even the path that I wanted to go down. But I was just chasing that feeling of being successful, like I had gotten from playing, right? Achievement, or continuing to evolve with my craft, and just like playing a level of excellence that mirrored a lot of my teammates and their drive as well, right? And so, and then obviously the world gets way bigger once you get out of this like soccer bubble. And I was like, whoa, this is way different. This is not happening elsewhere. So that was a really big challenge for me. And I had to take a step back in terms of, and just actually see how I was showing up in terms of, like, is this actually what I want to do? Am I just chasing something because that's what I thought I wanted to do? And I hadn't really had the chance while I was playing to, like, actually get an idea of whether or not this is something that I was very interested in, or it's just more of like a hobby. And that's what it was ended up being, is I was just interested in it. And I didn't want to do that for full time. And then that's actually what pushed me into media and broadcast. And it was like the feeling immediately, I was like, oh, yeah, this is what I was looking for, right? It's like you get to talk about soccer. It's not for everybody, but it did mirror my playing career as much as possible. It does feel like I get to do it over again, in a way that, like, with more knowledge about myself, my internal understanding, and who I am just as a person. It's like now I'm able to do that in the broadcast world versus when I was playing.
I think the interesting thing is as well, Christina, and a lot of people when I've said this to them, they're like, "Oh, I never thought about that." So I look at my career right now. We can talk about the superstars. We can talk about the players that were at the peak of their powers on a consistent basis, playing for the best teams in the world, winning most weeks, winning Premier Leagues, winning Champions Leagues, winning World Cups, winning the Euros, winning all these huge, and we know the players. We know those types of players that were always at the pinnacle and unbelievable players, unbelievable success. Now, from my personal perspective, I think I played something like 400 and 450 games, whatever it was, right? Okay. I probably lost over half. No, I wouldn't even say no. I definitely did. I definitely will have lost over half of those games. And a lot of the times, okay, you know, I spent a vast majority of my career in the Premier League, some great seasons, but I got relegated twice. And other times you had these sort of relegation tussles where you got safe late on, and there was some great stories behind them and things like that. So when then people say to me, do you miss playing the game? There are certain aspects that I do miss of it, but I probably lost more games than I won. So if you're looking from the outside, it's like, oh, well, you were able to play professional football for 15 years, whatever it was. But there's still a lot more to it than that, because like there was certain times where I'd come off the field and it's like, I remember a few instances, came off the field and had a bad performance and the team had played badly. I wouldn't open my curtains for 2 days. Didn't want to speak to anybody and didn't want to see anybody. Now, you know, and in my career, okay, I got to 2 FA Cup finals. One of them I missed because I had done my ACL, and the other one I was on the subs bench. Now, you know, so success is always down. It's down to the individual and how you see things. But I wasn't part of promotion winning teams. I wasn't part of teams that had won leagues and won major trophies and things like that. So then the question was asked to me, you know, when I was finished, I was like, do you miss it? The only thing I miss about football is, and you'll know this, Lori, is those 2 minutes after the game is finished. You're in the dressing room. It's been a great performance from the team. It's been a good individual performance, and you've taken your body somewhere that you shouldn't take it. That feeling of pure exhaustion, just the silence, just for those 2 minutes where you can't feel anything. For me, that is the ultimate feeling in sport. It's an unbelievable feeling that it's very difficult to describe.
Yeah, it's really well said. I agree with that completely.
That's crazy. So, like, for me, it'd be that 2 minutes in the tunnel with the players getting ready to go out.
Oh, so yours would be before the game.
That mine is before the game. It's when, especially when you did like international football, right? Like Brazil was always my favorite, right? And they're sitting in the tunnel and they're just chanting, and there's that adrenaline and that rush. Cause that for me set the tone for everything. It's like, oh, let's go. Like at times when I'm like there and I had the 2 teams behind me and they were quiet, I'm like, anyone, Bueller, can like we get this going? I try to like ramp them up. But those would be my 2 minutes of like excitement. But I think that's really cool. I've never heard about like that 2 minute of like, right, it's you guys have reached the ultimate, and it's that quiet pause, and you know, the quiet in the storm that doesn't happen very often. It is something that's so intimate to you and your team that nobody else gets to see. There's no commentators, there's no TV, there's nobody in there. Your physio is not telling you to cool down yet. No, that's an incredible moment. But like, it's like kind of going back to that point of like, I think that's unique because, right, we sit here and, right, former Premier League, defender for, right, Man United. I'm going to get these right. Man United, Derby County, Southampton, Sunderland, and obviously Stoke City, captaining for it. And that's the response is like, I've played a game, I lost 50%. When you said that, it reminded me of like the Roger Federer quote, right? Like learning that he was the best in the world. And then I forgot, it was one of his famous quotes where he tells you how many matches he's actually lost, right? How many points he's lost, or let me put it this way, how many points he's lost, yet he's the best in the world. And how that's part of this overall kind of total of success and that mentality to be able to be a player at that high of a level. But so speaking of like high of a level, I know there's quite a things in the future of the game, but some of the past. And I know that Kevin is really, really, really excited about some of these return of the old school weapons is what he has it part of. And for me, this is something that you would probably have to walk us through a little bit more of these stories about the cultural phrase. Lori knows it, right? Could they do it on a cold and rainy night in Stoke? Educate me, because I was lost and everyone was laughing during the pre-match.
So obviously we're talking about Rory Delap. You know, but the fascinating thing is, like, Rory was one of my best friends in football. We played together at Derby County, then we played together at Southampton, and then we played together at Stoke City. And, you know, it was great. Over the summer, his son Liam now plays for Chelsea. So Rory flew over with his family because they were based in Philadelphia for one of the games. I was covering the game, and we met up for a coffee, and we hadn't seen each other for about 6-7 years. But going back to the throw-in, there was a light bulb moment, but it was so bizarre because, like, Rory's one of the nicest lads you'll ever meet, but he wasn't in a rush to tell anybody he had a long throw. Never at any point, right? So we were at Derby together, and like every now and then it'd be used. Then we were at Southampton, same again, now and then it would be used. And we had, if I remember this correctly, when we were at Stoke, Tony Pulis was the manager, and we know Tony Pulis, like set pieces, everything, that's his like, whoa, that just gets him going, that gets him out of his seat. And I think one day, Rory, I think he was injured, and he was walking around the field while we were doing some set pieces. And like Tony had just said something on the lines of, Rory, just chuck the ball in for us. Rory picks this ball up, puts it behind his head, and he just threw it. And everyone, including myself, who'd known Rory by this time for about 8 or 9 years, knew he had somewhat of a long throw. We just looked at him, and you could see Tony Pulis' whole body change. His whole body change. It was he had an out-of-body experience. It was like, what was this? What have I just seen? And then that was a story of it. And then it actually became world famous. More so, not as much in the Championship, but then when Stoke got promoted, it became world famous in the Premier League. And you would speak to the opposition players after games, and some of the things that they would tell you due to like how hard they'd worked to try and stop, you know, the success of like a Rory Delap throw going into the box. We were a big team. We were a physical team. I remember playing Hull City. I think Hull City, they were in the Premier League, and it was either the first or second year in the Premier League, and we played them, and the ball went back to their goalkeeper. This is on YouTube. This is how crazy it is. So the ball goes back to the goalkeeper. I think it's Bose Myhill. He's in goal for Hull City. The ball goes back to him. What our centre forward, I can't remember who it was at the time, is pressurising him. So you're thinking, right, okay, the goalkeeper just wants to get out of harm's way. He takes a look at the touchline, and like everyone's thinking, he's going to put it out. He turned around, and I promise you have to get this on YouTube. He turns around towards his own goal and puts it out for a corner. I kid you not, because at that point, a corner was less likely to cause problems than a throw-in from Rory, because his throw-ins were unbelievable. The amount of goals he scored, the amount of own goals that would come from them. And it was just this, like people would talk about the length of throw that he would have. But it was the trajectory, and it was the pace on the ball. And now all of a sudden you go back to the saying, you know, can you do it on a cold and windy night on Stoke or whatever it is on a Tuesday night? That just added to it. And then you had the locals as well. The Stoke City fan base is incredible. You know, they will, if they see you, they would rather see you run 50 yards and just have a full-blooded tackle and take 3 people on across the ball into the box. So it all went hand in hand. So Tony Pulis, he took this and he ran with it. And then you'd speak to players from the opposition, like after the game, and some of them would tell you they'd spent 2-3 days working on dealing with long throws. So from our side of things, it was like, okay, if you're spending 2 or 3 days working on trying to stop Rory's long throw, what normally would you be doing in those 2 or 3 days, which you're actually missing out on? And we used it to our advantage. It most certainly wasn't the prettiest football. If I had to commentate on one of those games, I think it'd be difficult because we were a second ball team, and we made, you know, we didn't try and pretend that we were anything else. But it was you know, it just changed the dynamics, and you're seeing it back in the game. Now look at Arsenal, what they do with their set pieces. You've got Brentford, they've got a long throw. And I think it's genius, because I think defending is cared less about now. People forget that it's an art. So therefore, if you can create more problems for defenders who aren't necessarily being coached in the same way or coached to the same capacity of importance, then you're going to create more problems.
Oh, Danny, if I can, like, when you say, because I know you and I were exchanging text about coaching our kids.
Oh,
we're still,
here we go.
Yeah. And then me, I'm like, I think you pushed me. By the way, I am probably going to coach in the spring because of our text messaging this weekend.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. Mine's U10 recreational girls, but still. You say this like defense, and there's like a lost art to it. So I played a defender when I played all the way up through college ball. What do you mean by the loss of the art of it, just so that we're all on the same page?
Because I think now, and I include goalkeepers in this, so I include goalkeepers and I include defenders. Some of the greatest defenders over the years, you know, they were first and foremost defenders. I think now when we talk about goalkeepers, the first thing that gets mentioned, are they good with their feet? That seems to be, and I'm not saying this is happening at clubs, but I can guarantee that one of the top 3 topics for a goalkeeper is, oh, well, can he play out from the back? Is he good with his feet? Where, you know, for so long it was, can he stop the ball going into the back of the net? We talk about centre backs, we talk about cultured centre backs, and I know that the way it is the way that the game is progressing. You see centre backs now, the technical ability that they have is unbelievable. And now, don't get me wrong, when I was playing, there were some unbelievable centre-backs that had unbelievable footwork as well. You know, you look at the likes of John Terry, you look at the likes of Rio Ferdinand, they were Rolls Royces, as in terms of not only were they unbelievable defenders, but they could take the ball and they could pass the ball. They were just that elite level, like, I mean, the cream of the cream. And now it seems to me that it's more important that a defender is good playing out from the back more so than he is at being a defender. And I think we see that we do see those struggles at times. And I don't think that's because defenders necessarily don't want to defend, but I don't think the coaching side on defending is what it used to be. And that's where I believe that I'm not saying it's a forgotten art, but I don't think it's treated as importantly as it has been in the years gone by. You know, you look at someone like, okay, you have an ultimate defender. I look at someone like Van Dijk. Unbelievable defender, unbelievable with the ball at his feet. But I think a lot of the times now, if we say, okay, what about this defender? How good is he? And then I think the first thing that will come to a lot of people's minds is, can be got at defensively, but he's good with the ball at his feet. And I think that's what I mean. And don't get me wrong, that's football. That's the way that it's going. You know, it's a never ending cycle. You know, we're seeing now set pieces, we're seeing long throws, we're seeing all of them come back. So what goes around comes around. You know, and I was thinking about it the other day, and it'd be interesting to get your two's take on this. So, like, when I was playing, more often than not, you would play against 2 centre forwards. And what we're seeing now, and I had a look at it a little while ago. You look at the teams that have been successful, and I'm only just looking at MLS at the moment because obviously it's a league that we cover. Look at the successful teams in MLS. A lot of them play with 2 up front, and people say, okay, well, what's the issue there? Most defenders now that are playing in MLS, they're not used to playing against 2 centre forwards.
I agree. Yeah,
they're not used to playing. So when I was playing, if I was playing against 1 centre forward, I didn't like it. I really didn't like it because there'd be me and the other centre back, and it was all about, okay, well, who's marking him? Am I marking him? Is he marking him? And if the communication wasn't right and the centre forward was clever, he would cause you problems. I think it's the opposite effect now. So we talk about what goes around comes around. I think we're at a process at the moment where the majority of centre backs, and like I say, I'm just looking at MLS at the moment. You look at a lot of centre backs, they want to be having to deal with 1 centre forward against 2 centre backs. But if you were to put 2 centre forwards up there, I don't think a lot of them would know what to do. A lot of them wouldn't be saying, fullback, you need to tuck in, or central midfielder, you need to drop a little bit deeper. And a lot of the teams that are having success, they're actually playing with 2 up front. And I find that fascinating as well. So you've got a generation, so to speak, that's not used to dealing with 2 centre forwards. They're used to dealing with 1 centre forward. And when 2 comes up against 2, then that's when the defensive problems then come about, because we were always taught, you've got to be good 1 versus 1. Simple as that. You have to be good one versus one. Whereas now on a football field, more often than not, you want to make sure that it's 2v1 in your favor. So it's fascinating and it's interesting just to see how football is continuously changing.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point in terms of, also, I just feel like too, one of the things, well, let me back up. Why do you feel like more teams are playing with 2 front runners now, 2 strikers?
So if I go back to when I was playing and teams would play, a lot of teams would play 4-4-2 then. But what you had to have one incredibly unselfish striker, because he had to be able to drop in to make that extra man in midfield. And I think what you're seeing now is teams playing with 2 centre forwards, but one of those centre forwards may actually be a number 10 who can then drop in to help out. Yeah. And I just think there's an understanding probably from coaches that, well, if we play 2 up front, we're going to cause more problems.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now going hand in hand with that is more teams starting to play with 2 up front. So then the sort of challenge back to that, to try and deal with that, we're now seeing teams play with back threes more than we ever have done. Because you've still got that numerical advantage. 4-4-2, it's 2 centre-backs against 2 centre-forwards, whereas if you've got 3 at the back, you've still got that extra man. So you're starting to see that in the game as well. And I don't say that it always happens, but like a number of times when you will see a back 3, unless it's someone like Conte, who he always loved to play a back 3. Some coaches will play a back 3 because they don't have 2 centre-backs that they can trust. Whereas, a back 3 for so long was specifically where it's like, no, this is how we want to play. We've got wingers that are more traditional wingers than fullbacks, where I think now teams are saying, we're going to be dealing with 2 centre-forwards, so we'd rather have 3 centre-backs, because at times we don't trust a centre-back pairing to get the job done. That's not always the case, but there will be a number of coaches that look at it like that, I think.
Is there any other trends that you're noticing right now either?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think we're starting to see the return of the box-to-box midfielder. They disappeared for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, Jude Bellingham, he's probably seen more as like a number 10 when he's at Real Madrid, but he's a box-to-box midfielder. Declan Rice, box-to-box midfielder. So I think there are sort of these box-to-box midfielders starting to now rise again. And I wonder,
that's in the way that they're trained, and just like do you know what I mean by, like, as they're coming up through the rankings, right? It's like, okay, this is like the type of athlete that they are. So now it's a kind of, we're getting back to that. I'm just curious because I would agree with you.
Yeah.
But I always find it interesting to understand why those trends come back around, and why, because it could be about how you're playing or.
Here's my take on it. So for so long, you had incredible box-to-box midfielders. Unbelievable. If you just look at the Premier League alone, Steven Gerrard was incredible. Roy Keane was defensive, but he could get forward, and he didn't get credit for that, I don't think. Paul Scholes was one of those creative players, and, I'd be the first one to say that, tackling wasn't his strongest point, but you would see him in deeper positions. But what I think is that the game then started to evolve more, where the game got quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. So it's very difficult to be a 6 and an 8 at the same time. I'm not saying that we've got box-to-box midfielders that 1 second can be a number 6 and then can be a number 10. But what I think's happened, and this goes about football just changing all the time, we're probably living in an era now where football is probably most prominent with possession-based. Your top teams, the way that they own the ball, the way that they take the game to the opposition. Now, the opposition that are playing against them, they want to play counter-attacking football. So what I think's happening now, instead of having 2 teams that potentially want to play counter-attacking football, so it's 150 miles an hour, you have 1 team now that's more possession-based, so it becomes more methodical. So that defensive midfielder, or that number 6 turning into a number 8 3 years ago, was impossible because the game was too fast. Because you'd be saying, right, well, you can be a box-to-box midfielder for us. Okay, well, I'm going to go from the number 6 position defensively to go and advancing as a number 8, and you're going to get stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you might just be getting forward, then the ball's lost, and then you might just be getting back, but the ball's ending up in the back of your net.
Too much space.
Yeah, but I think because, I'm not saying the game has slowed down massively, but I think because of the certain coaches that we have that want to control the game more, that's enabled the game maybe to take a step back pace-wise. And that sort of then created a little bit more room for these box-to-box midfielders to come back into the game. Because if the game has slowed down, these players now have got more opportunity to get forward. But when the ball's lost, they've also got that extra time then to get back as well. But that's just my theory. It could be completely wrong, but
no, I
it's
think
just
that's true
something
because,
thought about.
yeah, no, I think it's completely true, especially when you think about there was just too much ground to cover, especially when it was like such a fast pace. I would even say that we're seeing that in the NWSL,
Okay.
because now more and more teams, you know, the idea of like what NWSL is a very transitional league. Yes, it is, and also we're seeing tactics evolve, and we're seeing teams try to keep more possession. It just looks very different than it even did like 2 or 3 years ago across the board. But now you are seeing players that can do both again, because they have the time to be able to cover that ground. Before it was just too direct and too back and forth. It was just like, you're just caught in no man's land, really.
Yeah.
No, and I'm looking forward to bringing that back. Right, we've talked about Anne Katrine Berger, goalkeeper for Gotham FC. Shout out to them for winning yesterday, an incredible upset against Kansas City. But like, that was kind of one thing that I've taken away, especially even here at my own team, is any of the Europeans saying how just different the game is here in the United States, right? Not enough time to breathe on the ball, right? It's just counter, high press, counter, high press. That I'm curious to see how like that, going back to our set pieces, right? Like how those are changing as well too, the fast throw-ins, the box to box, like how does that, you've been seeing it, but do you see it in these next two semifinals with Major League Soccer? Or there, Philadelphia versus NYCFC, right? That's one matchup. FC Cincinnati versus Inter Miami. Are you seeing that in either of those teams leading in or anything like that for these semifinals for someone to be keeping an eye out?
As in terms of set pieces?
Yeah, set pieces, or even like kind of like saying that trend that you're seeing here, that someone who might just be new to the game is now able to appreciate that from both of your guys' perspectives.
I think when you're looking within MLS, I think obviously within Miami, they speak for themselves. When you have the greatest ever player in Messi, is incredible. I think obviously Busquets, phenomenal, retiring at the end of this year. Alba, likewise, retiring at the end of this year. Suarez, he missed the game at the weekend, but he'll be available for the semi-final. And I've covered Inter Miami so many times this season, and you see the beauty of it is that you see how many teams try to address the problem, which is Messi, and you're wasting your time. Do not, honestly, you are wasting your time.
Thank you for speaking sense. Correct.
You are wasting your time. Like if a manager said to me, right, this is what we're going to do to stop Messi. That's what happened the first couple of seasons in MLS. Teams worked so hard in stopping Messi, when the whole reality is there's a reason he is called the greatest ever player. It's because he cannot be stopped. Now, when he was at Barcelona, people would ask me the same question when I would cover them in the Champions League games and things like that. And they would say, how'd you stop Messi? I said, you got to stop Busquets. You got to cut off the supply line. It's as simple as that. Now, I look at this Inter Miami team, and obviously the Barcelona team was just the perfect team. Unbelievable defenders. I think at one point, every single player in the team was world-class. Every single position that was being upheld, world-class. Now, what you're starting to see with teams is understanding that we cannot stop Messi. So I'm not saying let's forget about that, but let's understand that we potentially are going to concede 2 goals. But you will have opportunities to score 3 goals, because Inter Miami, as good as they are going forward, they will give you opportunities defensively. And they play Cincinnati. And I find that a really, really interesting game, because I did the regular season game, Cincinnati against Miami, and Cincinnati beat them 3-0. They've got good players going forward. And I think a coach like Pat Noonan, he will be understanding that it's going to be very difficult to stop Messi. Yes, you can get a lot of players around him, but he always finds space. But he's got match winners going forward. So he'll look at it and he'll probably think to himself, in an ideal world, yes, we keep a clean sheet. But if not, we can't get too concerned about stopping Messi. Just because of the simple fact you cannot stop him. But what you will do, you will get opportunities against them. And then, you look at Philadelphia Union, Bradley Carnell just been, coach of the year, and quite rightly so. What he's done has been an incredible job. And then you want to talk about intensity? Just spend 10 minutes watching Philadelphia Union. Laurie, you've covered them so much more than me this year. How? You must have been so impressed with them, because I think everybody thought when the days of summer were coming, it was like, oh, they're going to be exhausted, but they just weren't.
That's what I'm most impressed by, is just their, ability to continue to have this level of play and intensity. I mean, mainly because of Bradley Carnell when he was at St. Louis, that ended up being kind of the talking point, right? Is that they died and do well in the playoffs after having a tremendous season their inaugural year, but not the case with Philadelphia. I mean, they just continue to push. They continue to, they've just been a joy to watch. And I mean, I know you and I are both huge fans of Jim Curtin, and we enjoyed them prior as well. Obviously, last year wasn't the best year, but then to see them come out this year and have them put on display what Bradley Carnell has instilled in them, just tremendous.
I've got a question for you two, and it's a question that I've asked a few people, right? And I'm interested to see you think about this. And it's sort of to do with Philadelphia Union, but it's also a greater context, right? So when you talk about MLS MVP, right? Philadelphia Union, they won the Supporters Shield. None of their players will have been in the running for MVP. Okay, they just wouldn't. It's just not how it works. And I think they've got a few players in the team of the year, right? Mm-hmm. So football now, in my opinion, is more collective than it's ever been. It's not about the individual. So if I was to say to both of you, let's go back, I don't know, let's go back 10, 12 years, right? If I was to say to you, you have a minute to name me from like 12, 13 years ago, 7 world-class players, anywhere playing in the world, right? And I was to say to you, right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to name me 7 players. And then I was to say to you, at this moment, right now, name me 7 world-class players. I think you would struggle to name me 7 world-class players now, whereas if you go back 10, 15 years ago, I think you could do it within 30 seconds. And that is because the game is becoming more collective than ever. And that's another way in which I think football is evolving now. It's not about the individual, it's more about the collective now than ever. Yes, you'll have the individuals, the current day individuals, like a Haaland, you know, who's incredible. But I don't think it's anywhere like it used to be.
Do you also think, though, that is the game has evolved so much? So there's, like, I would struggle to name 7. Well, not name 7. I would struggle to narrow it down to 7, probably. But I totally understand your point. I agree with that. I wasn't sure if it was.
I think it's the coaches. I think it's the coaches.
Oh, interesting. In what way, though?
The way that, so if you look at someone, what tends to happen here is that Guardiola is the guy. You know, yeah. It's as simple as that, you know, and I think everybody sort of, I'm not saying tries to copy him, but tries to take a leaf out of his book. And if you look at Manchester City, you have Haaland. He is the one player which is like, he is our guy. But if you look at the rest of them, it's collective. So, for example, Haaland still has to do his fair share. So I would probably go back, if you went back to a certain point in football and you had these difference makers, you would defend with 10 players, including the goalkeeper. And you would allow 1 or 2 players to just go, you just get yourself in position, because when we win the ball back, we're going to give you the ball. You could not play for Manchester City now if it was that mindset. Every single player has to be involved because the press is such a big thing now. It's not about individuality, it's about collective. So I think obviously, you know, generation after generation, how players are coached as youngsters, I think the street player now, unfortunately, is disappearing. Yeah. But that's disappearing because of the way the coaching is going now, where it's about the collective more than the individual. And we lose some of those special talents. Like, I don't know, England-wise, whether we will ever see, you know, the likes of a Wayne Rooney again, a Paul Gascoigne, a Joe Cole, which just played with this unbelievable amount of freedom that it was just like, they were an absolute joy to watch. And I think that the way that football is going now, those players are going to be very, very few and far between, because I think players are coached from a very early age now, and they're having a lot of that freedom coached out of them because they're expected to be part of a collective. And if you want to go and take on 3-4 players and you lose the ball and then you're out of position, well, that's not going to be good enough. And I don't like to see that. I don't want to see players going forward sort of become robotic. I still want to be able to see players to be able to play with flair and to be able to play with freedom.
See, that's interesting because when you asked that question, I did obviously go through the exercise, and you think of the Maradonas of the world, right, and Zidane's. But then I think of today's world class players. If I would think of it, they're all strikers just because of the fame and glory that's associated, right? But then I'm like, okay, do we ever center mids? Do we ever backs that this team is all playing against? And then honestly, then I broke it down to another element because me being in women's professional football, I always tell, like, when there's, parents with young kids, et cetera, and they're asking like, I want my daughter to play. And I was like, let her be as creative as possible. Don't scare her into the system of saying like, you have to pass the ball every time you receive it. Cause that's where I'm at. I'm at the fundamentals of a young girl's learning how to play football, because I always give them the example of a Marta of the world. Right. And you still see her going at it at 37, 38, because she can take players one-on-one. So we still have a world-class football player, at least in the women's side with Marta, because she has that creative, back to your point, it's a street football player. It's the creativity, and it's the flair, and it's to be able to take that. And I know, at least, I mean, and Lori can probably attest to it a heck of a lot better than me, but those who were able to, sorry, something dropped over here. Those who were able to take on that collective effort and play that game. Lori, I mean, did you see more of that when you were growing up, that more of the collective effort on the women's side versus the individualism that, we kind of maybe attribute that world-class footballer to be?
I think it's the environment. I think it really comes down to an environment. I mean, obviously we're talking about Marta, and she's spoken openly about, growing up in Brazil, playing street ball against the boys, and then that's how she learned the game, right? To take on 1v1, do these things. And to Danny's point, I think what happens, and this is a little bit of a generalization, but what does happen in the youth game here is that everybody gets in a line, we talk about combinations, you do this, and it's very much like, this is how you're going to play the game, instead of like a free flowing style, figure it out, right, that you would see if you're just like putting together a game together with your friends in your backyard, or out on the street. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? And so I think that's where it's changed considerably. Everything is so, you go to training, you have all these trainings, and then it's also, you're just playing tons of games. They're just playing a ton of games. And so I think what happens sometimes too is that we don't have players that miss the game, or that want to go out and like, hey, I'm going to go work on that was part of, not putting myself up on a pedestal, because I think all three of us, well, Christina with refereeing, but Danny, you and I can say like, okay, one of the things for me was I wanted to go out and train all the time when I was younger, because I wanted to get better. I wanted to improve the way that I strike the ball. And like, you had an off season, so you missed the game, and then you would go back and try new things. But now it's just, for a lot of our players, it's constant training, constant play. There's no ability to express yourself and try different things. And I think that's why you see a Kevin Sullivan who has set himself apart, because he does have that flair. He does have that ability to do something magical that I don't think you always see, specifically here in the US. And maybe it's more worldwide too. And again, these are generalizations in some way, but I also do think it's the kind of the nature of the trajectory of how the sport and youth has become a business in that regard.
I think as well, if you look, probably the most important position on a field now is defensive midfield. We had a defensive midfielder win the Ballon d'Or not so long ago, but Busquets never ever won it. Wow, and Busquets for me is one of the greatest ever defensive midfielders. He would start attacks and things like that. Why did he never win the Ballon d'Or? Well, the answer to that is what we've just been talking about. There was so many world-class players. Now, I love the fact that a defensive midfielder gets the Ballon d'Or, but they were never appreciated before like they are now, because they're so instrumental to a team, because you have these players going forward, you want these players that are going to go forward to connect, but you still need that player there, that disciplined play that can help the centre-backs who are great on the ball, who want to maybe go on a little bit of a run themselves. So I think that probably adds to the way that football is changing, because I think if someone said, listen, I may be wrong, maybe a defensive midfielder has won the Ballon d'Or over the years, but as far as I can remember, You know, it was shared between Ronaldo and Messi for so long. And then before then, it was, you know, mainly your attack-minded players. But now we're seeing a defensive midfielder being voted the greatest footballer in the world for that year. That in itself, I think it tells you how the game is evolving all the time.
Yeah.
And speaking of evolving, I know, Danny, you got practice to get to here shortly.
A little bit, yeah.
I love it. I love it. But there was one piece that I know that, caught my attention. I know you've spoken about it before, but I think it's important to kind of highlight it. And it's like your personal story of overcoming that fear of flying. I know, I think it's because of the way you've gone about that, right? When people take a look at how do you, I love that. I mean, obviously, because I'm the referee, I love that story of telling your son, right? Like, focus on what you can control. It's not the referee, right? It's putting the ball in the back of the net. This is kind of continuing to lead to how you coach your son is kind of how you've coached yourself in life. So, how, you acknowledged it, and you overcame it through hypnosis, but can you walk us through that moment, like what it felt like, and what was that moment you said, okay, I just got to fix this, figure it out?
It was difficult. It had got to the point where, Lori, I'm sure will say the same thing. What we do, it's wrong to call it a job. It isn't. It is, we're very, very fortunate to do what we do. But I'd got to the point where I couldn't enjoy the games because in the back of my mind, I knew that I was flying the next day. Now, what I didn't want to do, so Steve Cangelosi, who I work with work with him on a weekly basis, and I love him to bits. I confided in him. Obviously, a few other people that we were with week in, week out, I confided in, and obviously my wife. And it just got to the point where, so when it all started, it would be 30 minutes before I got on a flight, and I was like, okay, this is fine. But then it got to the point where it would start on a Tuesday. So I was present, but I wasn't present around my family because in the back of my mind, I was fearful of getting on a flight. And I tried everything. I'd have a drink to try and settle my nerves before I got on the plane. I would try over the counter pills that maybe could calm you down a little bit. But for me, that's not the answer because it's not something that you want to be doing all of the time. So then I got to the point, the off season before MLS started again, and I'd not mentioned it to anybody at MLS because the last thing I wanted was to have someone say, oh, it's okay, you know what, you can stay closer to home. I didn't want that. I didn't want the sympathy thought. I was like, I'm okay to talk about this, but it's not going to be until I've sort of got over the hurdle. So then I sat down with my wife and was like, I'm getting to a point where I don't think I can carry on with this. And then she was just like, I've been reading up about it. Would you consider hypnosis? And I was like, what? That was my initial reaction. I was like, we've got to be joking here, haven't we? And she was like, no. Are you prepared to try anything? I was like, well, it's the last straw, so I'll try it. So we got in touch with this gentleman in Philadelphia in the center city there. And we had sort of a Zoom call, and he said, okay, well, come in for the first appointment. So when I turned up at the first appointment, he said, how often do you fly? And I was like, well, it's every weekend. And he said, well, this is going to be really good for you because you'll be able to see the progression happening as you're going along. So I was like, okay. So we did the first one, which I think was maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And basically what you do, you sit down and you have a chat. I always thought to myself, it's going to be this old school watch put in front of your face and then just swung, and then you just, you fall asleep.
It was going to be too. Okay,
yeah, you fall asleep. No, and it was nothing like that. So he's talking. He said, okay, he said the key to hypnosis is meditation. So what you would do, you'd sit down in a chair, you'd get comfortable, and he'd be talking through meditation, and he would help you to sort of go into that sort of like meditation state, for want of a better word. And then what he would do, he would record what he was talking to me about. So I'd have my headphones, I'd be sat back, and then, you'd get that relaxed that you would start meditating. And because I was so desperate to get over this, I was willing to try anything when I was doing the hypnosis. So then what he would do after we had the appointment, he would send me the recording of the meditation through email. So he said, what I want you to do, I want you to listen to it before you get on the plane. So I was like, okay, no problem. So comes to the first one. So it's on the Tuesday, I'm flying on the Friday. On the Friday, I get to the airport and I'm in the lounge and I put it on. I'm listening to it. I get more dizzier and more anxious than I've ever been at any point during this. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what's going on? This is having the reverse effect. It's actually making me worse. So I then got onto the plane, my head's spinning. I put my hood on and I just sit in a corner. I'm just like, I just don't want to look at anybody. I don't want to see anyone. And then the next week I go in and he's like, how was it? I went, honestly? I said, it was horrendous. I said, I wish I hadn't done it. And he's like, I need to stop you there. So I was like, why? And then he just said to me, he said, you have to understand that like your brain is now fighting itself. You've got part of your, instead of all of your brain being fearful, you've got part of your brain that's fearful, but you've got the other part of your brain that's saying, no, I'm going to fight. So all of a sudden you've got this whole mess going on. So he said, just give it a couple more weeks. And then within, I think, another 4 or 5 sessions, I was cured. And my biggest problem on a plane now is boredom. But what you do when you get over an issue, you don't tend to think too much when you're in the middle of it. But when I got over this and I look back at how I was preparing for a flight, I was asking for trouble. I would get to the airport, a domestic flight, 2.5 hours before boarding. Well, what's that going to do? That's just going to make your anxiety go through the roof while you're waiting to get on a plane. You've seen planes landing and taking off. I'd then sit on the plane. I'd make sure I always got a seat where I could see the flight attendant. I would get my stopwatch on my watch, and I would, the minute the plane would take off, I would click my stopwatch. And for the first minute, it didn't matter whether it was a female or a male, I was staring at the air hostess or air host. They must have been looking at me and thinking, what's this guy doing? Because I was looking at how they were. So if they were relaxed, then I was going to be okay. But this just became like a vicious circle, and it became worse and worse. But I have, and obviously, Lori, I know that I've spoken to you about it when we were on a flight. I have the utmost respect now for hypnosis. And I spoke to somebody and they said, would you tell your story? And I was like, I'd tell my story. And the reason I'm happy to tell my story is because if it helps one person, then I've done my job. And I kid you not, the amount of people that have got in touch with me since saying, I didn't know that hypnosis could work for fear of flying, but all other fears as well. And I was like, that will do me. I'm delighted. So I'm glad that I did it. And I'm glad that I overcame it because, yeah, it was just affecting every single part of my life.
Danny, didn't you tell me also that you, Frank, the hypnosis
Yes.
told you that, okay, like you're good to go now after like the 4 or 5 sessions, right? Or however many. And then you were like, well, actually, no, I kind of want to stay on for a few other things.
I do it now. I do it once a month now. I do
amazing.
I do it once a month. But the interesting thing is, it's a really good point that you mentioned there, Laurie, is that you look at it and like, I said to him, I said, do I need to do any more of this for flying? He was like, no, you're fine now. But what you find is that when you do the hypnosis, that fear of flying sort of subsiding, I think a lot of it is control. I think if I'm not saying I'd be miles better, but I think if someone put me alongside the pilot and said, right, okay, well, you can do this bit on the plane and you can do that on the plane, I think it would have lessened my fear of it. But what's happened is through hypnosis, it's also sort of filtered in to other parts in my life. So I now find myself more of a relaxed person in certain situations where previously I may have got like a little bit frustrated. So I find that it's sort of like I say, it's flowed through into everything and everything else in my life. But the one scary thing about it is that you have very little control of your brain, very little control of it. And I think the more we can understand that, and the more we can respect and appreciate that, and probably respect and understand people that, like when people used to say to me, oh, I've got anxiety. I was like, well, just, you'll be fine. It's like, I do have the utmost respect for people that deal with anxiety every single day and that deal with panic attacks and things like that, because I had it for a short period and it just turned my world upside down. So I have a newfound respect, but also an understanding of, if you have an issue like that, don't be afraid to go and try and figure it out. And if you can, it feels wonderful because you feel as though you've accomplished something.
And Danny, do not fly with me because I show up 30 minutes before the plane takes off.
No.
So
well, Christina, so on the group
and
chat,
I'm perfectly fine with it, but it make everyone else around me anxious.
The group chat that I'm on with Lori, I had a new personal best last week when I think I was flying to Charlotte. I had a new personal best. I got to the airport 39 minutes before takeoff.
Hey, so welcome to my club.
Yes.
The only reason why I don't do that, Danny, is because I'm always like, I just need to grab a coffee typically in the lounge. So I'm like, I just need to get enough time to be like, let me bust up there to the American lounge and then like slightly jog to the gate because we're all on the same. I am on like a swift, slight jog, I guess is the best way to put it every time. I mean, with the amount we fly, it makes sense. So.
Yeah. And Danny, thank you really, truly, for joining us here, Everyone's Soccerish podcast. Listen, Danny, what's your next gig you got going on?
Do you know what? I've got a couple of weeks off now. It is Philadelphia against NYC in the conference semi-final. So I'm looking forward to that one. Nice little bit of a break now.
Okay, wait. I do have one quick question though, just to finish it out. Is just what do you find is your favorite part about the job now?
Cool. I look forward to the flying now. I actually look forward to there's something very comfortable about that, which is really weird, but it's been at the games. It's been at the games. You cannot be. And it was the same. I remember when I was in England and we were considered, we ended up being considered critical workers as analysts and commentators, because what happened was nobody could leave the house. So when football came back, we were put on this list. So we would drive to these games and, it was great to be back doing it. We'd have the crowd noise in our ears. And for the first couple of weeks, it was great. It was brilliant to be back. But then it became awful. You could get home quickly from the game, but there was nothing. There was no atmosphere or anything like that. And you just had this crowd noise put into your ears. So you get an extra appreciation of being at a full stadium. Feeling that atmosphere, being in amongst that atmosphere. And I think probably the most enjoyable part of it is it's not scripted. You have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. And Lori, I'm sure you can say the same thing. And Christina, I think like from the games that you've refereed, anything that can happen will happen, and expect the unexpected. And that's what I love. That's what I love about sport. It's just so unpredictable and you just have to go with it.
Mm-hmm. With
we say something in the ref world. We're like, the game gives you enough. Don't cause your own problem.
I used to do that as a player. Happens. That's why I used to mess up a lot.
I know. It's like, why did the referee do that? The game's going to give you enough issues. Like, why are you creating your own? But last question, we're leaving it to Kev the Manch, is MLS. Which team is the MLS Stoke City? 15-second answer. Go.
Oh, can I give you two? Okay,
sure,
I'm going to
go.
Not? Okay, I'll give you an East and a West. Philadelphia Union, and Minnesota. There you go.
There you go. Catch Danny on Philadelphia Union versus New York City FC. Lori, welcome back from all of your other TV gigs. I know you're going to sit out here shortly. And thanks all for checking it out. Danny, go have fun coaching. I'm going to call you later for some coaching tips here myself shortly, as well as hypnosis. So thanks, Danny, for everything.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching the Soccerish podcast. You can follow us on YouTube, subscribe, and as well, follow us on social media.